The night the moon made its choice, nobody was ready for it. Not the courts. Not the kingdoms. Not the two kings whose lives would be permanently rearranged by a woman pressed against a cold stone wall in a mended dress. And certainly not her. Zara Ashfield had spent 21 years learning to be invisible. She had learned it the way children learn things that keep them safe, quietly, thoroughly, without anyone teaching her explicitly, simply by understanding from a very young age that visibility invited attention and attention invited cruelty and cruelty, when directed at her specific body, had a particular and practiced vocabulary. Split skin. The god's error. Cursed. Her body was divided down its precise center, ivory pale on the left side, deep ebony on the right, meeting at the bridge of her nose and the midline of her lips and the center of her sternum with a cleanness that looked deliberate rather than accidental. Both halves of her were warm-toned in their own way, rich and living, and the line between them was not jagged or rough, but smooth and exact, as if whoever had made her had drawn it with a steady hand. She had never once in her life been allowed to experience this as beautiful. She was about to learn what it cost a king to agree with everyone who had told her otherwise, and what it cost another to disagree. Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you are already hooked in on today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. We like to know our pack members from all over the world. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Grand Convergence of Velmara happened once every 3 years, and no pack in the 5 territories had the political luxury of refusing it. For the great packs, the ones whose names appeared on border agreements and trade charters and the formal records of interterritorial law, the convergence was opportunity. A place to display strength, negotiate alliance, arrange the marriages and agreements and subtle shows of dominance that determined whose territory expanded and whose contracted in the years that followed. For the Ashfield Border Pack, it was obligation. They came because refusing was unthinkable and attendance was barely tolerable, and they arranged themselves in the margins of the great hall of Duskmere Castle with the practiced invisibility of wolves who had learned that the safest position in any room was the one nobody was looking at. Zara found her corner within 3 minutes of entering. She was good at corners. She was good at angles, specifically the angle at which to stand so that the left side of her body, with its ivory pale skin, faced the room while the right side, with its deep ebony, stayed toward the wall. People noticed contrast. They couldn't help it. But they noticed it less when they only saw half of it, and less notice meant less staring, and less staring meant she could get through an evening without collecting enough wounds to last her another 3 years. The hall was extraordinary in the way of places built specifically to communicate power, 3 stories of dark carved stone, iron torchlight blazing from fixtures the size of carriages, banners from every territory in Velmara hanging in long colored rivers from the vaulted ceiling. Every surface said the same thing: we have been here a long time, and we intend to remain. Every guest in the room wore wealth like a second skin, the silks, the jewels, the bored confidence of wolves who had never once questioned whether a room like this was meant for them. Zara wore gray wool, mended at the elbows. She wore it as well as it could be worn, which was to say she had done her best with what she had, which was the story of her life condensed into a single garment. She was watching a group of Northern Pack representatives when the world changed. It was not gradual. There was no warning, no slow-building awareness or gentle nudge from somewhere spiritual. It was a detonation. Pure energy, starting at the center of her sternum and exploding outward through every nerve ending she possessed simultaneously, hot, violent, overwhelming, the specific sensation of something vast being activated that had been waiting her entire life. Her wolf, quiet for 21 years of careful, deliberate suppression, erupted to the surface of her consciousness with a roar that obliterated every other thought she had. Mate. The word reverberated through her skeleton. Ancient. Sacred. Absolute. Zara's hand flew to her chest. Her knees buckled. The stone wall was the only thing between her and the floor as her body tried to process something it had no adequate framework for. Her eyes moved without her permission, pulled by the bond's direction across the enormous hall with the precision of a compass needle that had just found north after years of spinning, and found him. Caven Dreth, Alpha King of Duskmere, ruler of the most powerful territory in the Five Kingdoms. The man whose name appeared first on every interterritorial document, whose word could redraw borders, whose approval could make or destroy any pack in Velmara. He was standing on the platform at the hall's far end, mid-conversation with the Alpha of the Eastern Reach, and even across 100 feet of crowded stone floor, even through the noise and the movement of 500 wolves, Zara could feel the bond blazing between them like a lit road. She could feel the moment he felt it too. His body changed, a subtle thing, imperceptible to anyone who was not connected to him through something sacred, but Zara felt it through the bond as clearly as weather. The conversation died on his lips. His wolf, always controlled, she could sense its control even at this distance, the iron discipline of an alpha king who had kept his animal perfectly managed for 6 years, threw itself against its constraints with a force that resonated through the thread between them. His eyes moved. Searching. Rapid. Following the pull. They found her. And for exactly 4 seconds, Caven Dreth looked at Zara Ashfield across a crowded hall and felt something he had spent his entire adult life avoiding. Wholeness. The specific, devastating wholeness of a man who has been incomplete without knowing it and has just encountered the missing piece. Then he began moving toward her. The crowd parted automatically. It always did for him, the reflex of power in a room full of people who recognized it. Each step brought the bond into sharper focus, warmer, more urgent. His wolf was communicating in single syllables, mine, claim, now. He came close enough to see her clearly. And everything inside him changed temperature. He saw the gray dress first. The mended elbows. The worn hem. He cataloged it the way he cataloged everything rapidly, analytically, with the cold assessment of a man who had been trained since childhood to read situations for their political implications. Then he saw her skin. The split of it. The ivory left and ebony right, divided down the center of her face and neck with a precision that was, objectively, striking. He saw her eyes, wide, dark, terrified, and blazing with a hope she was failing to suppress. He saw her posture, pressed against the wall, shoulders curved inward, the posture of someone who had spent her whole life trying to take up less space. He saw her. And behind him, arranged around the platform he had just descended from, were his council members. His nobles. The alphas of 4 other territories. The most politically significant wolves in Velmara, all watching their king cross his own hall toward a woman in the darkest corner. Think, Caven ordered himself. Think clearly. Not with your wolf. Think. He stopped in front of her. She looked up at him. The hope on her face was the most dangerous thing he had ever seen. It was going to make what came next much worse. He made himself look at her the way he knew the court was reading him, deliberately, cataloging, a survey rather than a recognition. He watched her understand what the look meant. Watched the hope begin to fracture. Fast, he told himself. Final. This must be some kind of error, he said. His voice rang out louder than intended. Conversations nearby died. She flinched. The tiniest movement. He saw it, and filed it in the part of himself that would torture him with it later. I felt the bond, she said. Her voice was steadier than he expected from someone whose knees were visibly shaking. You felt it too. I know you did. Feeling something does not oblige its acceptance, he said. He let his gaze move over her slowly, deliberately, the worn dress, the bare feet where she had lost her shoes somewhere in the crowd, the dark curls falling over her face. He watched each detail register on the surrounding observers like a verdict being read. Look at what you are wearing. Look at how you have presented yourself in the hall of the Alpha King. The bond. Look at this. His eyes moved to her skin, the split of it, the contrast. He forced his expression to remain cold. Do you understand what the court will say? What the neighboring alphas will think of a king who accepts a mark like this at his side? The gods chose. She was trembling now, but her eyes had not left his. He had to give her that. She was not looking away. Something in him that was not the king found that extraordinary. The gods chose. You cannot simply. The gods made an error, he said. He turned to the hall. His voice rose. Every word precise. Every word chosen. Every word aimed. I, Caven Dreth, Alpha King of Duskmere, reject this bond. I reject you, Zara of the Ashfield Pack, as my fated mate. You are not worthy to stand at my side. I renounce the bond. I renounce this claim. Before witnesses of all 5 territories, it is done. The bond screamed. Pain tore through Caven's chest like something physical, hot, ripping, the sensation of something sacred being dismantled by force. He locked every muscle in his body. He set his jaw. He kept his face cold and his posture immovable, and he stood in the wreckage of what he had just done, and he did not show a single thing. She was not as practiced at not showing things. The sound she made was not dramatic. That was the worst part. It was involuntary, the cry of a body experiencing something it was not designed to survive. She folded. Her knees hit the stone floor with a crack that made the nearest wolves wince. Her hands pressed to her chest. Her whole body contracted around the wound of it. And Caven stood over her and did not move. Around them, some wolves looked away. Others watched with the morbid fascination of spectators at a disaster. Someone laughed, a short, sharp, cruel sound, and Caven did not look for who it was because if he moved even once he was going to do something he could not undo. A court attendant came forward and helped her upright. Zara looked at him once before she was guided toward the door. One look. Not anger. Not hatred. The look of someone who had been prepared their whole life for exactly this and had not, despite all the preparation, been ready for the specific shape of it. Caven turned back to his court. The celebration continues, he said. His voice did not waver. Inside him, the severed bond throbbed like an open wound finding air for the first time. And somewhere behind him, the sound of the door closing. And then silence where there had been something. A silence that would live in him for the next 9 months, like a splinter he could neither remove nor ignore. Chapter 2. She ran because her body demanded it and her mind had no argument left. Zara moved through the servants' corridor at the back of the great hall with the specific, focused energy of someone whose nervous system had overridden every higher function and reduced her to a single imperative: away. Her breath came in shallow pulls. The bond's severance was not a metaphor, it was physical, a tearing in her chest, something warm and real that had existed for approximately 4 minutes of her life, and had been taken out without anesthetic. She made the tree line beyond Duskmere's rear wall before her legs stopped cooperating. The crying came without her permission, and she let it deep, wrenching, body-wide, the kind that used everything. She had learned long ago that suppressing it only made it last longer. So she sat against an oak, and she let the night take all of it, and she did not try to stop until it was finished. When it was finished, she was cold and the moon was high and she was still in Duskmere territory. She shifted. The change, normally fluid, was agony. The bond's wound had infected everything. She came through it on her knees in wolf form, trembling, but standing. Her wolf was small. She had always been small, an Omega's wolf, the kind that pack hierarchies looked at and categorized and dismissed. Her fur was split the same way her skin was, cream pale on the left, deep charcoal on the right. The moonlight caught both halves of her simultaneously. She ran. Through forests she did not know, across streams that numbed her paws, over rocky terrain that tore at her pads. She ran without direction and without plan, following only the internal compass of away from here and the dim understanding that remaining in Duskmere territory was not something she could survive psychologically. By the time the sky began to lighten, She had crossed 3 territorial markers without knowing it and collapsed beneath the roots of a fallen redwood somewhere in the wild boundary lands between kingdoms. She meant to rest briefly. Her body took more than briefly. She did not hear the 2 men until they were close enough that running was already impossible. She scrambled upright, too slow, too stiff, too depleted, and found herself facing 2 hunters who had stopped at the sight of her and were studying her fur with expressions that shifted from curiosity to something older and uglier. "Split-marked," the older one said. His voice changed quality. "My father's father told me about them. Cursed things." "Bad luck," the younger agreed, backing up slightly. "You don't let a cursed wolf walk away." Zara tried to growl. What came out was embarrassingly weak. The first kick caught her ribs. She did not track the sequence after that. Pain became the only information available, systematic, intentional, blow after blow from men who had decided she was a problem to be solved rather than a creature to consider. She tried to bite. She tried to run. She did everything a wolf with a severed bond and a night of hard running had left in her, which was nothing like enough. The last thing she registered was cold water, a stream, her body half in it, and a thought that arrived with the specific clarity of something she no longer had the energy to fight. He was right. I was always the mistake. Then darkness. Complete. Total. Absolute. Her wolf body strained toward healing and found the wound in her soul blocking every channel. The severed bond had taken the healing with it. The darkness held her. And 3 miles away, in the direction she had been running toward without knowing it, a kingdom was waking up. Chapter 3. Theren Vane, Alpha King of Solara, had not slept properly in 5 nights. This was unusual enough to concern his advisors, who had begun leaving carefully worded documents on his desk about the importance of rest and governance, which he had read with the polite attention of a man who had no intention of acting on them. His wolf was restless in a way that defied management. Not anxious, his wolf was not an anxious creature, having been raised alongside a king who understood that panic was the most expensive emotion available to someone in his position. This was different. Directional. Like a compass with a destination it had not yet been given permission to announce. On the 5th dawn, Theren stopped arguing with it. He was gone from the castle before the kitchens had started the morning fires, shifted to his wolf form at the outer gate, golden brown fur catching the pre-dawn gray as he ran the eastern border. His territory was beautiful in this light, ancient forest, the kind that had been here before the kingdoms came and would remain after, tall enough to make an alpha king feel appropriately small. His wolf led. He followed. The stream was still. Pale morning light turned the water silver and quiet. And on the bank, half submerged, was a she-wolf. Theren shifted in motion, human knees hitting wet earth before he had fully processed what he was looking at. His hands were moving, checking breathing, assessing damage, with the automatic competence of a man who had been in enough emergencies to skip the shock phase. She was alive. The breath was there, a butterfly flutter, faint enough to miss, steady enough to hold. The damage was severe. Bruising through her fur, deep and systematic. A front leg at a wrong angle. Ribs visibly disrupted on the right side. Blood in the stream water, diluted but present. She had been beaten, specifically and deliberately, by something with size and intention behind it. Cold rage arrived in Theren's chest and was immediately filed away. Later, he noted. Useful later. He shifted her position carefully in his arms. She was alarmingly, heartbreakingly light, and as he adjusted his grip, her eyes opened. Just a sliver. Just a moment of consciousness before it closed again. But Theren saw. Her fur was split down the center. Cream pale on the left, deep charcoal on the right, as precisely divided as if drawn with a careful hand. And in that fraction of a second, her eyes, one brief, unfocused moment of awareness, contained a depth that he registered somewhere below thought. Protect, his wolf said simply, urgently. Save her. Theren ran. 3 miles at full human sprint, holding her against his chest, measuring every footfall to minimize what she felt. The guards at Solara's gate had his orders before the carriage dust had settled on the morning air. Healer. Emergency. Recovery wing. Now. They moved. Brea, who had been Solara's head healer for 2 decades and had treated everything from infected war wounds to a noble's dramatic allergic response to shellfish, went pale at the sight of the she-wolf's condition. By the gods, she said quietly. Who did this? I don't know yet, Theren said. That question is already in process. She should be dead, Brea said, beginning to work. Her body's healing is almost completely suppressed. It's as if something damaged her from the inside before the physical attack began. She looked at him with the directness of a woman who had worked for kings long enough to say what she saw. This is bond wound damage, Alpha King. Someone severed her mate bond recently. Forcibly. Theren was still for a moment. Save her, he said. Everything else is secondary. He stationed himself in the corridor. He stayed there for 7 hours. Various members of his court found him there at various intervals with various matters of state, all of which he handled in the corridor outside a closed recovery room door. Because the idea of moving further away than this was something his wolf flatly refused to cooperate with, and he had, after some internal negotiation, decided not to fight it. When Brea emerged with cautious eyes and a carefully constructed expression, Theren straightened from the wall. She'll live, Brea said. It will take time. The leg is set, the ribs are wrapped, the blood loss is significant but not fatal. She paused. When she wakes, she will be frightened. Whatever happened before the hunters found her was worse than what they did. Theren nodded once. I'll be there when she wakes, he said. Brea opened her mouth. Closed it. Of course, Alpha King, she said. He went back to the corridor. He waited. Chapter 4. Zara woke to white ceiling and clean linen and the confused, suspended sensation of someone who had expected not to wake at all and is not yet certain what to do with the information that they have. She was in human form. The shift had happened during sleep, her body taking the deeper healing available in human shape, and she was in a bed that was unlike anything she had previously slept in. Real mattress. White sheets. A window showing pale morning light over grounds that were green and well-kept and entirely unfamiliar. She tried to sit up. Her ribs issued an immediate and categorical objection. She turned her head instead. A man was sitting in the chair beside her bed. He was watching her with blue-gray eyes that were direct without being aggressive, calm without performing calm, the genuine article, the specific quality of someone who is actually at ease rather than managing their expression into ease. He was large in the way of Alpha Kings, that bone-deep structural solidity, with auburn hair pulled back from a face that was sharp in the jaw and considerably softer everywhere else. He had the look of a man who had been sitting in that chair for some time and had not considered leaving. Fear moved through Zara's body reflexively, automatically, the response of someone whose nervous system had learned that the presence of powerful wolves was information requiring immediate assessment. She tried to move back. Her ribs reminded her, again, of their position. Don't, the man said, quickly, and his voice was low and not a command. You'll pull Brea's stitching and she will be furious with both of us. Zara went still. Watched him. He did not lean forward. He did not move toward her. He simply remained in the chair at a distance that was, she processed this, calibrated. Close enough to reach her if she needed something. Far enough that she had room. Where am I? Her voice came out scraped. He reached for the water cup on the bedside table and held it toward her without closing the distance, giving her the choice of whether to reach for it. She reached for it. Solara, he said. The castle's recovery wing. My name is Theren. I'm the Alpha King of Solara. He said it without the self-importance most kings layered onto titles, informational, the way you might tell someone the name of the road you found them on. I found you on the eastern border stream bank before dawn. You were badly hurt. She drank. Her eyes stayed on him over the rim of the cup, reading him, cataloging, the rapid assessment she had spent 21 years perfecting. Large. Alpha. King. Alone in this room with her. No performance of dominance. Chair chosen deliberately, close, but not intimate. Voice kept low. Movements minimal and announced before they happened. He was, she thought, either genuinely careful or so practiced at the appearance of it that the distinction was irrelevant. The hunters, she said. Something in his voice went very flat. They have been identified. That matter is already being addressed. By whom? By me, he said simply. She looked at him. You've seen my skin, she said. Her voice was careful. Flat. The voice she used when bracing for the thing that always came next. Yes, he said. And? Theren looked at her across the white bedsheet with those blue-gray eyes that had not moved from her face since she woke. And it is extraordinary, he said. I've genuinely never seen anything like it. It looks to me like something intentional rather than accidental. As if whoever made you had a specific idea about what you should look like. The silence lasted a long moment. You don't believe that, she said. Her voice was harder than she intended. I don't say things I don't believe, he said. It wastes time. Zara stared at him. Tears arrived without her consent, which she hated, and she blinked hard against them. I'm sorry, she said automatically. You don't need to apologize for anything, he said. You were beaten on my border and you're in my recovery ward. I'm the one who should be apologizing for the condition of my territory's wild lands. She blinked. That wasn't your fault. No, he agreed. But it happened here. That makes it mine to address. She looked at him for a long time. Why did you bring me here, she said. You don't know me. You could have left me for the pack healers in the nearest village. You could have. You were dying on my border, he said. What else would I have done? The simplicity of it landed in her chest like something thrown from a great height. Most people would have, she started. I am not most people, he said. Not arrogantly. As simple fact. Her name came out before she decided to give it. Zara, she said. My name is Zara Ashfield. Zara. He seemed to consider it the way people considered things they intended to use again. It suits you. She looked at him across the white room in the clean morning light of a kingdom she had never visited and felt something happen in her chest that was not the bond, nothing like the bond, not that detonating violent certainty, but something quieter and more careful. Something that grew rather than exploded. You are safe here, Theren said. The words carrying the specific weight of a man who chose them with precision. No one in Solara will harm you. No one will judge you. I give you my word as Alpha King. Zara, who had stopped believing in promises at an early age and had good reasons for doing so, found, to her own considerable alarm, that she believed him. Which was perhaps the most dangerous thing that had happened to her all week. Chapter 5. She stayed. The first week was purely physical recovery, Brea's efficient care, the slow reconnection of a body that had been pushed past every reasonable limit. The broken leg healed in stages. The ribs mended with the painful gradualness of bones that had been genuinely displaced rather than merely bruised. The deep fatigue that was partly blood loss and partly something that lived below the physical, the aftermath of a severed bond, the specific exhaustion of someone whose soul had been recently handled roughly began, fractionally, to lift. Theren visited every day. Not hovering. Not performing concern. He came, he sat in his chair, he brought books with brief notes in his own handwriting tucked between pages. Interesting argument about Eastvan trade routes in Chapter 4. Wrong about the timeline, but the methodology is worth reading. And he stayed for whatever duration felt natural and then he left. It took Zara 4 days to stop waiting for the angle. The ulterior purpose. The moment the careful behavior revealed itself as performance. By the 8th day, she had provisionally accepted that there might not be an angle. By the 12th day, she had started writing responses in the margins of his book annotations, which he noticed and did not comment on until the 15th day, when he arrived to find her sitting up properly and reading with a pen in her hand, and said, "Show me what you wrote." The conversation that followed lasted 4 hours and covered territorial trade policy, the structural failures of 3 consecutive interterritorial negotiations, and the specific miscalculation in Duskmere's eastern border agreements that had been compounding for 11 years. Theren had not caught the miscalculation. His 3 senior advisors had not caught the miscalculation. Zara had spotted it in 2 hours of reading. He looked at her at the end of the 4 hours with an expression she was beginning to learn, the particular quality of his attention when he encountered something genuinely interesting. It was different from his neutral expression, from his diplomatic expression, from his training expression. It was focused and slightly unguarded, and he deployed it rarely enough that she had learned to notice it. "How did you?" He stopped. Started again. "Where did you study?" "I didn't," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "You are entirely self-taught," he said. "I had a lot of time," she said. "Being invisible gives you access to a remarkable number of conversations that people don't guard properly." Something moved through his expression. Not pity. Anger, she thought, brief and controlled. At the waste of it. At the world that had required her to develop extraordinary capability in the margins of its attention rather than at its center. "You're going to help me fix the Eastfin agreements," he said. "Am I?" she said. "If you're willing," he said. "As my advisor." "Officially." She looked at him. "Officially," she said. "With the title, the access, the authority that comes with it," he said. "Everything you need to do the work properly." Zara was silent for a long moment. "And in exchange," she said. "In exchange," he said, "Solara gets the benefit of someone who has been studying its political landscape for 2 weeks and has already found an error no one else caught in 11 years. She looked at him for a long moment. "All right," she said. "But I have conditions." "Tell me," he said. So she told him. And he listened fully, without interrupting, without managing the conversation toward a conclusion he had already decided on, and at the end of her conditions, he said, "Yes to all of it. Is there anything else?" She stared at him. "That was easier than expected," she said. "Your conditions were reasonable," he said. "I'm not in the habit of arguing with reasonable things." She wanted, absurdly, to laugh. She managed not to. 3 weeks later, she was attending advisory sessions from a chair at the table rather than the corridor, and the sessions were running longer because she kept asking questions that nobody had thought to ask before. And Theren's counsel had developed a range of expressions about this that ran from impressed to unsettled to something that looked like professional wounded pride. For weeks after that, Theren appeared at her door in plain training clothes. "You were helpless when I found you," he said. "I intend to change that." Training was nothing like she expected. She expected patience and perhaps some condescension, the particular gentleness that people deployed when they were not sure how much you could take. She got neither. Theren was demanding in the specific way of someone who had assessed your capability and decided it was higher than you had been told, and was now holding you to his assessment rather than yours. He pushed her. When she made excuses, he waited them out in silence. When she improved, he raised the standard without ceremony. He taught combat the way he apparently did everything, as architecture, with the understanding that rushed foundations collapse. The day she knocked him off balance, genuinely, for the first time, with a move he had taught her 6 weeks prior, she stood over him where he had landed in the training ground dirt and felt something in her face do something she did not have immediate control over. Joy. Actual joy. Uncomplicated, unguarded, resident of a face that had not known what to do with it for a very long time. Theren looked up at her from the ground. He looked at her the way he sometimes looked at her when he did not have the immediate management resources available, with something that lived in the territory between admiration and want, something private and specific, something he had not given her permission to see and was visibly attempting to recover before she finished seeing it. He stood, dusted off his clothes. "Counter," he said. "We're not done." She let it go. But she filed it. And in her room that night, with her own books on her shelves and her handwriting on half the documents stacked on the small desk Theren had installed without asking. She sat at the window and thought about Caven Dreth. Not with longing. That was the thing she needed to be honest with herself about. There was no longing left. The bond was scar tissue. She thought about him the way you think about the specific moment before a significant injury, not with nostalgia, but with the clarity of understanding what caused the damage and what it built. He had looked at her and made a decision. He had been the official verdict of everything she had feared she was. And then Theren had picked her up from a stream bank and carried her home and handed her books with his own handwriting in the margins. The two experiences sat side by side in her chest, and she examined them both with the specific analytical attention that had been her only real advantage for 21 years. One told her what a certain kind of king saw when he looked at her. One told her what she actually was. She pressed her palm against the window glass and watched Solara's grounds in the dark and felt something rise in her chest that had no previous experience to reference. She felt like herself. Fully. Frighteningly. For the first time. And herself, it turned out, was not nothing. Herself was, in fact, considerably more than nothing. The roar that had been building in her since the stream bank got louder. Chapter 6. The invitation arrived 9 months to the week after Theren had carried her home. He was reviewing a border negotiation in the strategy room, a room Zara had quietly reorganized within her first month, to his advisor's visible discomfort and his private entertainment. When the messenger arrived with the black wax seal of Duskmere pressed into the folded letter, Theren read it twice, set it down, sat with it for a long time. Alpha King Theren of Solara, I extend formal invitation to the royal presentation ball of Duskmere, to be held on the next full moon, at which I will present my chosen Luna before the assembled kingdoms. Your presence would honor this occasion. Caven Dreth, Alpha King of Duskmere. He had known, for 9 months, the outline of what had happened to Zara. She had told him in pieces over time, in the way of someone testing the weight of a floor before committing their full step carefully, gradually. With the specific trust of a person who had learned that information was the most dangerous thing you could give someone and was deciding whether to give it anyway. She had told him about the convergence, about the bond, about the hall, about what the words had cost her body. She had not told him the king's name. She had not needed to. The seal of Duskmere. A Luna presentation ball. 9 months after he had found her on his border, broken and half-drowned, with a bond wound suppressing her healing. The mathematics were not subtle. Cold settled in Theren's chest. Not rage. He had been managing rage about this for 9 months in small daily doses, whenever he passed her in the corridor and registered how carefully she still sometimes moved, how she still occasionally flinched when she did not expect someone to enter a room. Not rage. Something colder and more specific. He was still sitting with the letter when the door opened. Zara came in carrying a stack of trade documents. She was always carrying documents now, had become functionally indispensable to the administrative operation of his kingdom in a way that his senior advisors were still processing, and stopped when she saw his face. She put the documents down. What happened? She said. Theren looked at her for a moment. Then he slid the letter across the table without speaking. He watched her read it. He watched her with the attention he had been paying her for 9 months, the specific, comprehensive attention of someone who had learned her face the way you learn a language you intend to use for the rest of your life. He saw the recognition land. He saw her go very still. He saw the pain arrive, and the anger behind it, and then, and this was the thing that made him love her, though he had not yet said so, the something else. The thing that straightened her spine a 1/4 inch, and lifted her chin, and put a light in her eyes that was not grief, but its opposite. She set the letter down on the table. I want to go, she said. Zara. I want to go. Her voice was completely even. 9 months ago I was pressed against a wall in a mended dress praying nobody would look at me. She met his eyes. I am not her anymore. I need to know that not just here. She pressed a hand to her chest. But there. In that hall. Where it happened. Theren looked at her. You don't have to prove anything, he said. I know, she said. I want to. A pause. And Theren. Her voice shifted fractionally, softer, more direct, with the specific quality it had when she was saying something real rather than something managed. I would feel safer going with you than going without you. Something happened in Theron's chest. He had been managing it carefully for several months. He was a disciplined man. He did not let things show on his face without his permission. Nothing showed on his face. The honor, he said, would be mine. Her smile arrived, the full one, the one she had kept locked away for the first 3 months of her recovery, and now deployed with a naturalness that still, every single time, did something significant to his composure. Good, she said. Then I need a dress. The dress they commissioned was not an accident. Deep burgundy silk, fitted through the waist and shoulders, flowing from the hip. The neckline designed specifically to frame the split of her skin, to draw the eye to it, to present it as the featured element rather than something to be minimized or balanced around. The seamstresses had looked at Theren when he described what he wanted, and then at Zara, who had been standing quietly to the side watching, and then back at Theren with the specific expression of people who were beginning to understand something. They built the dress to announce her. When Zara walked out of the dressing chamber the morning of their departure, wearing it, with her hair pinned fully back and no curtain of curls forward and her spine already straight before she had taken her first step, Theren stood. He looked at her for a long moment. He said nothing. She looked back at him. Well, she said. Well, he said finally, and his voice was slightly rougher than usual in the way it sometimes was when he hadn't managed something in time. You look like someone who has already won. Zara held out her hand. He took it. The carriage rolled toward Duskmere. And in the dark of the carriage interior, neither of them spoke much, and both of them were thinking about the same thing, and neither of them said so. Chapter 7. The carriage rolled through Duskmere's outer gates at dusk, and the castle rose above them, all dark stone and iron torchlight, and the specific atmospheric weight of a kingdom that had built itself to intimidate. Zara looked at it through the window. Her hands were clasped in her lap. Her breathing was controlled. Theren was watching her from across the carriage. Tell me what you need, he said. She looked at him. I need to walk in there with my head up and not flinch. You won't flinch, he said, with the specific certainty of someone who had spent 9 months watching her find her spine. You don't know that. I do, he said. I've been watching you for 9 months. I know exactly what you do when something tries to diminish you. He held her gaze. You get taller. She stared at him. Then, that is the strangest compliment I have ever received. It was not a compliment, he said. It was an observation. The carriage stopped. The door opened. Theren descended first. He turned and offered his hand. Zara took a breath that she did not let show on her face. She took his hand and stepped down. The response was immediate and it was total. Every head within sight range turned. Every conversation in the entrance grounds stuttered and died, and then erupted into whispered replacement versions of itself. Zara felt the stares like weather. She had felt them her whole life. She knew their texture, and she walked through them the way Theren had taught her to walk into anything uncertain. Full commitment. No hesitation. Hesitation is an invitation. She kept her chin level. She kept her eyes forward. She kept her hand in Theren's, and she walked toward the entrance steps of the hall that had tried to define her as nothing, and the torchlight caught both halves of her skin simultaneously, ivory left and ebony right, and she let it. The whispers erupted like birds. Who is she? Solara's companion, look at her. That split skin. Gods, she's magnificent. Is that the same? That can't be the same she-wolf from the convergence. Zara heard all of it. She let it move past her. They entered the hall. The grand presentation ball of Duskmere was exactly as elaborate as the grand convergence had been, the same torchlight and silk and the particular self-conscious opulence of a kingdom performing itself. The crowd was dense. At the far end, on the raised platform, she could see him. Caven. Taller than memory, or perhaps simply perceived differently from this angle being one where she was not pressed against a wall hoping to go unnoticed. He was in formal black, dark hair loose, the posture of a man who commanded rooms without effort. Beside him stood a woman in gold, beautiful, composed, clearly trained from childhood for exactly this position. Zara looked at Caven and waited for the pain. What arrived was silence. A strange, clean, hollow silence. Like opening a book to a chapter that once contained the most important story of your life, and finding the words had faded. Not gone, she could see the impression of them. But their power had moved somewhere else. He is just a man, she thought, who made a terrible choice and now has to live inside it. Theren guided her through the crowd with the ease of someone who had been navigating political gatherings since childhood, and she moved with him. And she was aware of how differently she occupied her own body now compared to the last time she had been in a room like this. The protocol required greeting the host. They moved toward the platform. Zara watched Caven's face from 30 feet away. She watched him register Theren approaching, the standard diplomatic recalibration, political recognition, the extension of his hand, and the public-facing alpha response. She watched him begin the greeting. Then his eyes moved to Theron's companion. They stopped. His hand, extended mid-gesture, went rigid. The color left his face with a completeness that would have been satisfying in a different version of Zara. In this version, she simply noted it, filed it alongside the things she observed without needing to react to. Dark eyes wide. Jaw controlled back into neutral approximately 1 second too late. The specific expression of a man encountering the full consequence of his choices in a burgundy silk dress. Alpha King Theren, Caven said. His voice emerged rough. He cleared it. The honor of your presence. The honor is mutual, Theren said smoothly. His hand covered Zara's briefly on his arm, a small, warm thing over in a moment. Allow me to present my advisor and companion for the evening, Zara Ashfield of Solara. Of Solara. Theren had added that deliberately. She filed it with warmth for later examination. Caven looked at her. Zara, he said. The word came out hollow. She looked back at him with the cool, complete politeness of a woman greeting a distant acquaintance at a formal function. Alpha King Dreth, she said. Congratulations on your chosen Luna. Solara wishes your union great prosperity. The public smile, courteous, impenetrable, and offering him absolutely nothing. We are honored by the invitation. She turned back to Theren. Shall we find somewhere to stand? She said, as if Caven were already behind her. Which he was. The knight moved forward. They talked with various nobles. They ate. They were admired, together and separately, by a significant proportion of the assembled court. Theren introduced her to 3 alphas she had never met and watched with visible private satisfaction as she handled all 3 introductions with a political ease that made it clear she had not spent 9 months in Solara's advisory sessions as a decorative element. Across the hall, Caven's eyes followed her for the entire evening. His chosen Luna, Mira, Zara had learned her name, was beginning to notice. Her expression had moved from composed to uncertain to something sharper and more wounded as the evening progressed, and Zara felt for her in the specific way of someone who understood what it was to be the person a powerful man did not look at. The orchestra shifted to a waltz. Theren extended his hand to Zara with the easy elegance of something practiced, and she took it, and they moved onto the dance floor. She had not known how to dance 9 months ago. She danced now with the specific grace of someone who had been taught by a demanding and patient teacher who considered dancing a strategic skill and had treated it accordingly. They had been on the floor for perhaps 2 minutes when footsteps approached. Quick. Deliberate. May I, Caven said tightly, stopping beside them, have a word with? I'm afraid my feet don't cooperate with everyone, Zara said pleasantly, without missing a step. Fascinating condition. Completely inexplicable. Theren made a sound that was emphatically not a laugh. Several nearby nobles clearly heard. Caven stared at her. She turned back to Theren as if the interruption had already been forgotten. My feet seem to be working perfectly well at the moment, actually. How strange. Remarkable, Theren agreed, his voice admirably level. Must be the company. A wave of barely suppressed amusement moved through the nearest crowd. Caven stood alone on his own dance floor for several very long seconds, while every noble within earshot found reasons to examine their wine or study the ceiling. Then he turned and walked away. And behind him, from the woman he had called nothing in front of 5 territories, came the sound of genuine laughter. Chapter 8. Caven made it to the terrace. He stood at the stone balustrade with both hands gripping it and breathed through the specific sensation of a man receiving the full, precise, architectural weight of his own choices. He had spent 9 months building the argument that he had been right, that the rejection had been necessary, that an Alpha King's first obligation was to his kingdom's image and political strength, and that the bond, however real, however devastating to sever, had needed to be subordinated to that obligation. He had built that argument carefully and maintained it through 9 months of a severed bond that throbbed like a missing limb and dreams he did not examine too closely, and a new Luna who was excellent and appropriate, and everything he had said he needed and could not make the argument stop. And now Zara Ashfield was in his hall, in burgundy silk that made the split of her skin the most striking thing in a room full of striking things. With her spine straight and her chin level and her hand in another king's arm and her eyes looking at him, when they looked at him at all, with the polite, hollow absence of someone for whom he had become approximately as significant as a lamp-post. She had not been angry. That was the thing he had not anticipated. He had anticipated anger, had prepared arguments against it, had built positions. He had anticipated grief, perhaps. A wound still visible. Something that said he still occupied space in her emotional landscape, even as the cause of damage rather than comfort. Instead, she had looked at him like he was slightly familiar and entirely irrelevant. And it had undone him completely. He heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Theren and Zara had followed him to the terrace. No, Zara had followed. Theren was slightly behind, his positioning deliberate, letting her lead while remaining close. "Caven," she said. He looked at her in the moonlight. The full moon was overhead, silver and enormous. It caught her skin on both sides, the ivory left and the ebony right, and illuminated both with the specific impartiality of light that did not share anyone's opinions about what it fell on. She was magnificent. He had built 9 months of argument against this acknowledgement, and it collapsed completely in the face of her standing in his moonlight looking like someone who had already decided what this conversation was. "Zara," he said. "I need to." "I know what you need," she said. Her voice was not unkind, which was somehow worse than if it had been. "You need to tell me it was a mistake. You need me to release you from it. You need to hear that it's all right." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not going to give you that. What you heard me say." "I didn't just hear you," she said. "I felt the bond tear. I woke up 3 days later in a recovery ward in Solara because my healing was suppressed and 2 hunters found me on a stream bank." She paused, each word placed with care. "I know what happened that night. I lived in it for 9 months." Caven felt something break in his chest. That was not the bond. "The bond still exists," he said. "Even severed, my wolf has never." "Your wolf's regret," she said, "is your problem. Not mine. I can fix it," he said. The desperation was in his voice now, cracking through the king register. "The temple says a blood ritual can attempt restoration. The bond can be rebuilt." "No," Zara said. The word was simple and complete and final. Behind her, Theren had gone absolutely still. "You won't even consider." "No," she said again. "I will not take part in a ritual you want because you've decided the first choice was inconvenient. I am not a door you get to reopen because the room on the other side turned out to be nicer than you expected." Caven looked at her. Looked at Theren. Looked at the way she stood, fractionally closer to Theren than the situation required. And the way Theren was angled toward her with the specific body language of a man who has been paying close attention to someone for a significant amount of time and has stopped pretending he hasn't. Something primal and specific and entirely counterproductive tore through Caven. "He has no claim over you," he said. Too loud. Several nobles near the terrace entrance heard it. "Neither do you," Zara said quietly. "The bond is gone. You destroyed it. In front of 5 territories." Her voice did not waver. "I am not a bond. I am a person. And I have built a life with Solara, and I am not going to dismantle it because you have reconsidered." Caven's wolf broke through every layer of king discipline he had built. "Then it will be decided the old way," he said. His voice rose, carrying across the terrace, into the hall, where the nearest nobles went abruptly quiet. "I, Caven Dreth, Alpha King of Duskmere, challenge you, Theren of Solara, to an alpha duel. By the old laws." The terrace erupted. Zara went rigid. Theren looked at Caven for a long, still moment. "Theren." Zara's hand found his arm. "You don't have to." "I accept," Theren said. Caven's joy tightened. "Tomorrow at dawn. The arena. Wolf form. By shadow law traditions." Theren held his eyes. "I accept. Not because I believe I have rights over her." He stepped forward, not aggressively, just forward, so that every word landed clearly. "I fight because you humiliated her. Because you stood in your own hall and you took apart a person who had done nothing to you except exist in front of you, and you did it specifically to hurt her, and you succeeded." A pause. "And because in this hall, in this kingdom, in front of everyone who witnessed what you called her 9 months ago, you are going to hear the truth. She was always worthy. She was always extraordinary. And I will defend that with everything I have." Silence. Then from among the watching nobles, someone began to applaud. Slowly. Joined by another. And another. Caven looked at his own court applauding a visiting king. Something collapsed in his expression. The elder of the Moon Temple stepped forward and announced the terms. "Dawn. The arena. Until submission or death." When everyone had dispersed, Zara turned to Theren in the now empty terrace. She looked at him with bright, frightened eyes. "He is brutal," she said. "He has been fighting since he was a child. His record in." "Zara." He waited until she looked at him. Then he lifted her hands and kissed her knuckles, one by one, 4 of them, slowly and deliberately, his lips warm and certain against her skin. She felt each one move through her like an answer to a question she hadn't finished asking. "I am going to come back," he said against her hands. "I give you my word." She pressed her forehead to his hands and closed her eyes. Neither of them slept. The moon held its position above Duskmere all night, silver and enormous, watching both kingdoms hold their breath. Chapter 9. The arena was a circle of ancient stone in Duskmere's rear grounds, surrounded by tiered stands that had been filling since before dawn. By the time the eastern sky went pink, every seat was taken. Word had traveled fast and far in the night: 2 Alpha Kings, a duel, a woman at the center of it, and the specific scandal of a king publicly challenged in his own hall. The crowd was dense, charged, crackling with the particular energy of an audience that has come for something significant. Zara sat in the witness section flanked by Solara's guards, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles ached. She had not slept. She had spent the night sitting at the window of the guest chamber, watching the courtyard below, feeling the specific helplessness of someone who has given everything they have and must now wait for someone else to be enough. Caven entered the arena first. He wore combat trousers and nothing else, bare torso showing the defined muscle and old battle scars of a man who had been at war more than once and survived it. His dark hair was tied back. His expression was the expression of a man who had decided what this morning was and was going to deliver it. The crowd roared. He was their king. Whatever the scandal of last night, he was still their king. Then Theren entered. He was calmer than Caven. That was the first thing Zara noticed, and it terrified her more than the battle scars. Caven's aggression she understood. She knew its texture. She knew what it did to rooms. Theron's calm was something else. The calm of a man who has decided what he is doing and why and has no remaining internal argument about it. He found her in the stands. Across the arena, across 100 feet of distance and an enormous crowd, his eyes found her immediately, the way they always found her, with that specific, unnerving accuracy that she had stopped pretending she didn't notice. He held her gaze for exactly 3 seconds. "It's all right," that look said. "I am here." Then he turned to the arena. The elder raised his hands. The terms were stated. The crowd fell into the absolute silence of 1,000 wolves holding their breath. Both alphas shifted. The transformations were brutal to watch, bones breaking and reforming, muscle expanding, the raw physical violence of a wolf asserting its full form. These were Alpha Kings. The process was faster, more complete, more powerful than any ordinary shift, and the wolves that stood at the end of it were enormous and nothing like the controlled, diplomatic kings who had been standing there a moment before. Caven struck first. No warning, no circling, no reading of the situation, pure explosive aggression. 3 massive leaps across the arena, jaws aimed at Theron's throat with the confidence of a wolf who had ended duels this way before. Theren moved. Not backward. Sideways. Fluid and fast, using Caven's momentum rather than opposing it, letting the force of the charge go past him before pivoting and countering, claws opening a line across Caven's flank as he slid past. First blood. The crowd erupted. Zara's hands pressed flat on her knees. Caven recovered with the speed of something genuinely dangerous. He reassessed, not a fighter who learned slowly. She had known this from the beginning. He adapted mid-engagement and circled. Hunting. Blue-gray eyes tracking every movement of the golden-brown wolf opposite him. They circled each other for 30 seconds of absolute silence from the crowd. Then Caven feinted left and struck right. It was good. It was genuinely good. The feint was early enough to be believable, and the real attack was fast enough that even a prepared wolf would have had to work to avoid it. Theren saw the feint, but his response was a fraction slow. Caven's jaws closed on his shoulder. Zara made a sound that she had not given herself permission to make. Deep. Puncturing. Blood immediately visible. The crowd screamed, approval from those loyal to Caven, horror from those watching from Solara's contingent, and the specific collective sound of an audience watching something tilt. Theren did not panic. He twisted. Used Caven's grip as an anchor point. Drove his own fangs into the back of Caven's ear, a smaller wound, but a precise one, the kind that communicated "I can reach you wherever you are," and Caven released, stumbling backward, blood now flowing from both of them. They separated. Circled again. Zara was standing. She had not noticed standing. The Solara guard beside her put a gentle hand on her arm, and she did not sit back down. "Come on," she thought. The words had no sound. They lived entirely in the part of her that had decided, somewhere over the past 9 months, that this specific man's survival was not negotiable. "Come on, come on, come on." Theren glanced at her. 1 second. Across the blood and the distance and the weight of an alpha duel that was tilted wrong. 1 second. And then something changed in the way he moved. Not harder. Smarter. Every movement after that was geometrically precise. He stopped fighting Caven's strength and started fighting his habits. He let Caven's aggression become a pattern. Let the attacks develop rhythm. Waited for the specific moment that rhythm produced a gap, and when it produced one, he was already there. Caven attacked again. Exhaustion was beginning to show, his timing slightly off, his recovery slightly slow, the specific degradation of a wolf who relies on first strike ending things and has been in a long fight. He charged. Theren moved forward. Under the jaws. Upward. His own fangs locking around Caven's throat, not to kill, positioned precisely to hold. Pressure applied with the anatomical knowledge of where submission was and was not a choice. Caven struggled. The crowd was silent. Theren held. Caven stopped struggling. The throat bared. The elder's voice rang across the arena. Submission. The duel is over. Theren of Solara is victorious. The crowd's response was half roar and half something more complicated, the specific sound of a crowd processing an outcome it had not expected. Theren released. Stepped back. Shifted. He was standing, covered in blood from the shoulder wound and the other cuts accumulated across the fight, but standing, and his eyes found her in the stands with the specific accuracy they always found her. And then his legs gave out. Theren. Zara was running before the word left her body. Guards were saying things she was not processing. She hit the arena sand on her knees beside him, her hands going immediately to the shoulder wound, applying pressure the way he had taught her, her hands warm and certain and terrified. I'm here, she said. I have you. I said I'd come back, he said. His voice was remarkably composed. You are covered in blood. Technical detail, he said, and his eyes, looking up at her, were tired and warm and entirely present. The healers arrived. She did not let go of his hand. Across the arena, Caven had risen from the submission position. He stood, and he looked at Zara, kneeling in the arena sand with her hands on Theren's wound, her eyes only for the man in front of her, her split skin catching the full morning light on both halves simultaneously. He looked at her for a long time. And he saw, with the specific clarity of a man who has just been handed the full consequence of a choice he made 9 months ago, exactly what he had thrown away. Not the beauty of her. He had been able to acknowledge her beauty since approximately the moment she had walked through his door in burgundy silk. What he had thrown away was this. The specific quality of her presence when she was not afraid. The way she knelt in an arena without hesitating. The hands that knew how to apply pressure. The person she had become in the 9 months since he had told her what she was worth. She had not become this despite what he did. She had become this through it. And she had become it with someone who had understood what she was immediately and had never for a single day needed convincing. Caven turned and walked out of the arena. The sparse, complicated applause of a court processing its own king's defeat followed him like a verdict he had written for himself 9 months ago. Chapter 10. Theren recovered. It took 3 weeks of Brea's care and Zara's presence. She sat with him the way he had sat with her, which was something both of them understood was not a coincidence. And at the end of those 3 weeks, he was standing in Solara's southern garden in the late afternoon light, testing his shoulders' range of motion with the methodical attention of someone who had been told to wait another week and had decided that was a suggestion rather than an instruction. Brea said another week, Zara said from the bench nearby, not looking up from the document she was annotating. Brea offers opinions, Theren said. I appreciate them. And ignore them. I appreciate and then assess them individually. She looked up at him. Your shoulder was punctured to the bone. It's healed to the bone now. Theren. Zara. He sat on the bench beside her. The late sun caught both sides of her skin simultaneously, the ivory left warm and cream gold, the ebony right rich and deep, the line between them in shadow. He looked at her the way he had been looking at her for 9 months, with the full attention of someone who had decided this was worth his complete focus and had not wavered from that decision. I need to tell you something. She set the document down. She turned toward him. He had been managing what he was about to say for several months. He had built various structures around it, professional framings, practical arrangements, careful diplomatic language that acknowledged the situation without requiring her to respond in any specific way. He had built all of these structures and had been, over the past 3 weeks of recovery with her hand in his, dismantling them one by one. I love you, he said. The garden was quiet. Birdsong. The distant sound of the castle. Not because of a bond, he continued. Not because the moon designated anything. Because you're the most extraordinary person I have ever encountered, and I encountered you on a stream bank 9 months ago, and I have been aware of it every single day since. Because you argue with me and win more than you should, and I find this completely unacceptable and completely captivating simultaneously. He paused. Because you walked into a hall that tried to define you as nothing, and you stood there like the word had never been invented. Because you held my hand in an arena when I was bleeding, and it was the specific hand I needed. Zara looked at him. The late afternoon light was warm, and the garden was quiet, and his blue-gray eyes were on her face with a specific quality. They had always had full attention, no management, completely present. I know what trust costs you, he said. I know this is not simple. I am not asking you to make it simple. I am only telling you the truth and giving you whatever time you need to do whatever you want with it. Silence. A long silence. And then Zara said, Theren. Yes. I have been in love with you, she said carefully, deliberately, with the precision she brought to everything that mattered, since the morning you sat in a chair beside my bed and told me my skin was extraordinary and looked at me like you genuinely, completely meant it. She held his gaze. I didn't know what to do with it for months. I have no previous experience with being seen clearly by someone and having what they see make them move closer rather than away. Clearly everyone you had previously encountered was operating with a significant perceptual error, he said. She laughed. The full one, open, unguarded, the laugh that had been locked away for years and now arrived with the ease of something that had been living in the right place long enough to stop being careful. I love you, she said. Without a bond. Without designation. With full information and no compulsion, and my eyes completely open. She looked at him steadily. I choose you, Theren. Every morning. Every room. Every day going forward, if you'll have me. He looked at her like he had found something he had not known to look for. You are everything I needed, he said quietly and didn't know to ask for. He kissed her. It was not the urgent, desperate kiss of the terrace moonlight. It was the other kind, the kind that arrives after everything that builds toward it has been built, that knows it has time, that is thorough rather than frantic. His hand found her face and she leaned into it, and the garden was warm around them, and neither of them was in a hurry. When they separated, both slightly breathless, his forehead dropped to hers. Ask me, she said. He pulled back enough to look at her. Zara Ashfield of Solara, he said. He reached into his pocket. He had been carrying it for 2 weeks, waiting, and opened his hand. His grandmother's ring, gold with a dark blue stone that matched his eyes in certain lights. Will you be my Luna? She looked at the ring. Looked at him. On one condition, she said. He waited. We go back to Solara tonight, she said. Immediately. I have had enough of Duskmere's hospitality. He laughed. Full and warm and unburdened, the laugh of a king who had stopped performing contentment and was simply, genuinely experiencing it. Yes, he said. Immediately. She held out her hand. He put the ring on her finger. She kissed him again, in the garden that had never belonged to either of them, under a sky that was beginning to turn the particular color of a day that had gone well. And they went home. 2 years later, Solara held a celebration. Not a political gathering. Not a diplomatic performance. A genuine celebration, with bonfires visible from the borders and music in the streets, and the particular collective happiness of a kingdom that has been led with both intelligence and humanity and knows the difference. Theren and Zara had been king and Luna for 18 months, and in that time Solara had become something the other territories watched with the complicated mix of admiration and envy reserved for things that are working better than expected. Their governance was specific and collaborative, his disciplined strategic mind and her extraordinary political instinct. 2 people who had spent 9 months learning each other's ways of thinking and were now deploying them in combination, which was, as several of their neighbors' advisors had privately noted, unfair. Children born different were not hidden in Solara. Zara had made this her first formal initiative as Luna, and she had made it not as a decree but as a conversation, pack by pack, community by community. Visiting settlements herself with the specific authority of a Luna who stood in every room with the full split of her skin visible and dared anyone to describe it as something other than what it was. No one dared. They called it the Luna's Mark. They called it Solara's gift. On an afternoon in early spring, Theren and Zara walked through the castle's south garden hand in hand, which was how they walked whenever there was no immediate governance crisis requiring their hands for other things, which Theren was privately motivated to ensure was as frequently as possible. I heard from the northern territories, Zara said. Duskmere has stabilized. Caven's political arrangements are holding. I heard the same, Theren said. I hope he finds something real, she said. She meant it. He could always tell when she meant it. I hope he finds someone who makes him brave enough to deserve them. Theren looked at her sideways. You have compassion for the man who... I have perspective, she said. He hurt me. But the hurt built me toward Solara. Toward you. She paused. I can't find it in me to be angry about what led me here. It would be like being angry at the road that brought you home. Theren stopped walking. He turned to face her. He looked at her the way he always looked at her, with the full, unmanaged, completely deliberate attention of a man who had decided that looking at this specific person was always worth stopping for. You are, he said, the most remarkable thing I have ever encountered. You've told me that before, she said. I'll tell you again tomorrow, he said. And the day after. And every day for the foreseeable future at whatever frequency seems adequate, which based on current evidence is likely to be significant. That sounds like a promise, she said. It is, he said. And unlike certain other kings of our acquaintance, his eyes held hers, blue-gray and warm and completely certain. I keep mine. She kissed him in the garden, in the spring light that fell on both halves of her skin equally, the ivory and the ebony both warm and bright, two halves of one person who had learned, at considerable cost and in the most unlikely possible way, that the world's verdict on her worth had never been accurate. Only one person's assessment had been. And he was standing in the sunlight with her hand in his, in a kingdom that had made her mark its own. She had come to the grand convergence pressed against a cold stone wall, dressed in mended gray, praying to be invisible. She stood now in the warmth of everything she had built. The split of her skin caught the light from both sides. And it was as it had always been, as a man with blue-gray eyes had said on the second morning she was alive enough to hear it, and had not stopped saying every day since. Extraordinary. Entirely. Permanently. Hers. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the very end, my beautiful story family. If this story moved something in you, if you felt every moment of that cold stone wall and the arena sand and the sunlit garden, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Tell me which moment destroyed you most. Share this with someone who needs to hear what happens when the world mistakes your worth and you decide to correct the error yourself. Our pack is everywhere, and I am grateful for every single one of you. We will see you in the next story.